Okay, so there's the recording. And so we're sharing the screen now, and make sure we get a good solid recording of this next lecture, because this one has to be posted. So it's only about 20 minutes, and then we'll break into some discussion about it. But I'm just going to have to narrate it, and I feel bad. This is one that's really fun to do in a discussion mode. So my apologies on that, but we just got to get the facts of the cases out there for students, okay, for the final. Okay, now Wisconsin versus Yoder, right, was the precedent-setting case. What was the precedent? Well, I know you guys know the answer, but I'll tell you anyway. The precedent was, if a state has a law, state of Wisconsin, that your kids need to be in school, your kids need to be what? In school. And so that's the precedent. Okay, but now do they have to go to a government-sponsored classroom, or they build a school? The thing is, the state law changed and made the impact of the law, of the decision of the court rather, on Yoder moot. That's a new term, M-O-O-T, meaning irrelevant. The precedent's still there, right? That precedent didn't change, but they did what we did here in Utah and passed a homeschool bill. Now, once the homeschool bill passed, that meant the Amish had another option, and they didn't have to send their kids to the actual classroom situation that had been set up before. They tried to work with the Amish and have the schools, you know, in areas that were easily accessible, and they'd send teachers in and they'd get some a bit of approval as to the teacher, you know, and that kind of thing. So they really tried to work out an accommodation based on Yoder, but nothing changed in the decision. It's just the state law changed, making mandatory compulsory education had to be in the classroom. So now it can be done like in Utah, it can be done at home. And I honestly do believe that Utah's homeschool law is about as good as anywhere in the country. It's clean, it's easy to understand, it's easy to follow. There's this nice transition between regular school and homeschool, and homeschool in Utah that works really, really well. And I imagine it does too in Wisconsin. But here's a key caveat I didn't tell you about Yoder. The decision said that at what age in Wisconsin can you drop out of school? Well, it's basically high school, right? So they could drop out after 8th grade. 9th grade and up is considered high school in most places. So they only had to go to K-8. They didn't have to go to high school. They could drop out even under Yoder, because that was the law in the state at the time. All this decision does is say whatever the laws are in your state, you have to follow them, okay? That's the importance of Yoder. Now, here's the thing, right? After 8th grade, they could drop out. Now, how many of you know somebody who's dropped out of high school, right? Now you're sitting there thinking, why would they do that? All these kinds of questions. But the truth of the matter is that the high school diploma is profitable. It's valuable. I mean, it's easier to apply for jobs and so on if you have one. But let me tell you a story. And it goes back to the GI Bill, which you guys have done a really great job of answering the question on the GI Bill, by the way. Pretty straightforward, but let me give you another caveat. Most of the soldiers that fought in World War II, majority, had not graduated high school, period. Most public school systems during the 1930s, Great Depression, only offered some places K-5 and some places K-8, and to finish high school was a big deal. It would be like getting an associate's degree today. It was considered optional, not required. Today, we have an expectation that high school is a necessary step along the way. But what about those soldiers? Now, remember part of the GI Bill where every soldier got a free college education if they wanted it coming back as a result of their service? So here's the government paying for their college degree. We're going to pay for their college degree. Okay, but they hadn't graduated high school yet, so many of them. So they created the GED program. You heard about the GED? Graduate Equivalency Exam, is that what it's called? Anyway, you can take a few classes, you drop out of school, you change your mind later, you can take a few classes and get your high school degree by taking a test. And it's called the GED. This is how all those soldiers got into college, because they were smart, but it wasn't a thing you worried about during the Great Depression. or World War II. After World War II, the college degree started to become really important, and they couldn't go to college because they had no high school. So the GED was invented to help those soldiers bridge the gap, and it worked. And here's the deal. When you pay for college education for free for a large group of people, here's what happened. We created the most educated population in the history of the country. Those soldiers who came back and then decided to go to college, and I know many of them, okay, wouldn't have gone to college otherwise, but wicked smart. They're the ones that created the computer age, the technology, the nuclear age. They're the ones that created the space program. They're the ones that created everything, basically aviation, whatever. They came back and they were the engineers that set the table for us today. Paying for college education works to make a population more productive, effective, and competitive in the world. We know that from the GI Bill. Now, I did have a friend of mine too who wanted to get into the military, the Army, right after 9/11. And he dropped out of school, right? Family situation was weird and all that stuff. And they let him just wander the streets all day. But wicked smart. He passed the GED, goes in, and he was in basic training at Fort Bragg for the 82nd Airborne Division, which is pretty elite. Went on to do amazing things in the software industry after he got out of the Army. So I'm just telling you that whatever the laws are, they can be changed and make decisions moot. Although, remember this, it's still the precedent. But the issue went away. So as long as you're homeschooling in the right way, great. Okay, other cases we talked about with precedent. So I hope I added a little bit more to Yoder there. That might help you on the final. But here we go. Now, you know that evolution became a hot button issue, a third rail issue, literally, once it started to be taught in American schools. And remember, there's not a lot of high schools out there, but those that were teaching it in the South ran smack dab into the Bible Belt. And the idea that only creationism should be taught. Remember, at this point, they're still saying prayers in schools every day. None of those decisions have changed. The things were different. And of course, you know, William Jennings Bryan, the perennial, 3 times, ran for president 3 times, drove up the voter rolls. I mean, whenever he was on the ballot, you know, the number of people turning out to vote was extremely high. He took up this case and Scopes was convicted. Since then, though, the courts have ruled in favor of the teacher. It starts with an Arkansas law banning instruction on evolution that was struck down by the courts in 1968 in Arkansas. Now, notice that these are mainly cases that happen in the South in the Bible Belt. Okay, out here, it was never an issue. It was never an issue out in Utah. Okay, Edwards v. Aguilar, though, is the key case. This is the one that sets the precedent. It's 1987. Louisiana law said that, quote, if teachers talk about evolution, they must also talk about creationism. We covered this one last time. This makes your science teacher now a theologian. They said no, they struck it down and said there's an appropriate place for each of those things to be taught. And that was the big case. And then when a group put together an alternative explanation to the universe and the Big Bang Theory and all that kind of stuff called intelligent design, it was really still creationism, though now in a book form, okay? And so in the previous case, teachers didn't have the understanding to teach theology if you're, say, a biology teacher or geology teacher. Here, however, they said, well, here's the book, teach out of the book. Court said, sorry, 2005, you're just doing the same thing, but with a new name and now with a book. But the science teachers, geology teachers, geography teachers, all that kind of stuff need to stick to their content and let the schools, as in which case that said each should be left to do their just work in their respective sphere. What decision said that? Okay, remember McCollum? So these are the driving cases, okay? But then it led us to this case, and I think we got this far in this class, did we not, about parochial schools? Okay, y'all know what a parochial school is, right? So to review, can a parochial school receive state and federal monies? Yes, they can. Look, this is not much of an issue here in Utah because we don't have a lot of big parochial school systems, but in other parts of the country, wow, a lot of the buildings that are built for school were built by private churches. And so as a result, it's a big part of how many students actually get educated. So this is, now look, here's the case here I'm trying to point out. There are no clear lines here. People want a clear line. They want yes or no. But the court has this huge gray area that it works in often, because it takes a lot to get a 5-4 decision, much less, any sort of consensus. And so in this particular case, yes, you can, but you have to separate the religious instruction strictly from the secular instruction, which is the non-religious part. So when you go into Juan Diego, I had a student who came from Juan Diego, and she's been talking about this. When you go from class to class, you know whether you're in the religious classroom or you're in the biology classroom or the science classroom or whatever. And they separate their funding. You have to pay tuition to get in there. And also the church, I'm sure, throws in some money, but that pays for the religious part. And the non-religious part, they can take state dollars. Another way around this would be vouchers. Vouchers are simple. You just give the parent a voucher worth about $6,000 in Utah, and they get to take it to the school of their choice. Now, personally, I've kind of been in favor of vouchers, because I think, that would give homeschool people a chance to, get equipment, books, that kind of stuff. But also too, well, would it lead to a lot more private schools springing up? Of course it would. Now, but in Utah, the voters turned it down resoundingly. And I've often wondered why. Mainly the argument was, we don't want our elementary school next to our home that we love watered down. Let's keep those local schools strong. So it was really elementary that decided the issue. But also too, is there a big need for church schools in Utah? What mechanism has been created by the dominant church in terms of population in the state that allows them religious instruction without having to set up a whole school system? Yeah, the seminary program. It works great. It's another, look at this, practical decision made by Utahns. Utahns make very practical decisions. And this was one of those accommodations that was made. And other religious groups can follow suit because they've passed laws that don't break with McCollum, that fit in, and we explained those in the last lecture. Okay, so look, sometimes it's tricky to understand where the line is. That line, by the way, that line could keep changing too, depending on the court. Another case could come up and move the line, as we're seeing with what case out of Mississippi that could move the Roe v. Wade decision in a different direction. What's the name of that case? I'll leave it to you to know that for the final. So there can be precedent breaking cases. Now, to highlight this, let's talk about this next one. This is school prayer. Okay, now, can we have organized school prayers, maybe an assembly at the beginning of school, where we have a school prayer here at UCAS? We don't do it, do we? Right? And that's because of, cases that we've already talked about. Can public schools have, though, what about this? What if we had prayer, but we did a non-denominational prayer? In other words, kind of a neutral prayer that everybody can like? Ooh, what's the issue there? Have you ever noticed that when you hear a prayer, go ahead, Sarah, I'll let you take it. I see heads nodding. I'm going to allow a little break in the lecture for.
Structured prayers, so some of them
That's right.
Don't believe in prayer unless it's the specific wording, and then other prayers believe you have to end it or begin it in a certain way. Other prayers believe like that it's not valid unless you start with this or
Yeah.
Some religions don't believe in prayer, that you're not supposed to. There are too many religions.
There's so many things. And for example, we have a rising Muslim population. So how do we accommodate that? And how do you, okay, so you've answered it brilliantly. So they don't work. They've been struck down by the courts as not being an answer. Okay, now here, what if we don't have a school prayer? And by the way, these are mainly Bible Belt issues, you understand, right? So in the Bible, but what if we, instead of having the school prayer, by the way, when I was a kid, we started school with prayer every single year. K1, 2, but about third grade, things started to change. I'm that old. These cases started to come out while I was in school. But here's the thing. Then what if we do a Bible reading instead? So you take a passage from the Bible, have a student read it to the class, and give their thoughts on it. What if we do that instead? Ouch, right? Yeah, that's not going to happen. How about in Spain? Did they do that? Do you start school with prayer in Spain?
I did,
You did.
but I went.
You didn't.
to Parochial.
Say that again.
I went to those. schools.
Oh, you went to a religious-based school, and you went to a state-run school, meaning the government.
It's like, it's a mix.
It's a mix
It's like private and public.
at the same time.
Some funds, we could, I don't know.
Wow.
But half of it, we could say, is paid by the government, half of it from the parents.
Holy smokes. Okay. And which church are we talking about?
My school was like that too.
Which church are we talking about?
Marist Church, founded by Marcelin Championner in France.
And yours?
I didn't go to church.
Yeah.
Okay.
Church
All right.
was just school.
Oh man, you guys have added so much to this class and give us a whole different international perspective to our little parochial attitudes, which means our local attitudes. Wow, you guys, it's great. Well, look, the Bible readings were also struck down. I mean, you'd have to have Quran readings and go on and on and on, and you can never get to a place where everybody would be happy with that. Can parochial schools though require Bible reading? Yeah, and they can have prayers to begin whatever. Do you know, I think we still say a prayer there at our graduation. That's interesting, right? So you check this time, UCAS graduation. Do they have a prayer at the beginning? I think they do still, right? But it's a sponsored event outside of school. And that's the technicality there. Anyway, so that can still happen. But anyway, can you ask, instead of a Bible reading, instead of a non-denominational prayer, can you ask for a 1 minute of silence to start school? Well, I remember that too. I remember, okay, we're going to not have a prayer this year, no Bible readings. We're going to have a moment of silence instead. So we're sitting there in elementary school going, what's this about? No clue what it was about. None. We're all just sitting there. This is interesting. Moment of silence. Okay. What should I think about? You guys would be on your phones.
That would be so fun.
It was weird. As a kid, you didn't understand the changes from year to year. And I remember very clearly though, remember starting school with prayer, big assembly prayer. And then I remember, oh yeah, so we're going to have some, ethical guidance. Then the next year it was like, sit there in silence. And it was okay. Made no sense as a little kid. But nevertheless, you can't do that either if it's a substitute for prayer or a scriptural reading. So that was also tossed out by the court. Can you provide time for personal prayer? Can we say every day, okay, we're going to provide time for personal prayer. It's 11:05. There you go. You got 3 minutes. Can't do that either. Oh, but wait a minute. There's an exception. If you're Muslim, can you retire from the classroom to meet your daily prayer obligation? You have to pray 5 times a day at certain times. That is allowed. So the lines here move around. And there's a place right here on campus. It's a sanctuary that our Muslim students can go during the time that they are called to prayer. But here's the deal. Whereas maybe most denominations can just say prayer in their head, right? They can't. It's a bit of a ceremony. It's beautiful. How many have watched a Muslim prayer before? It's pretty cool, right? It's really cool and sacred. It's just neat to watch, right? If you ever have that opportunity, but you can't do that in class. That just would not work. And so they provide a quiet space. And I know we've provided that for Muslim students here if we need it. Right? We have a room always ready if needed. So look, don't expect to get clear, bright yes or no lines on everything. These cases, the way they've been decided, could change. And this is the court that could do it. This is the first truly conservative court that we have had since 1930s. So all these cases that we're reading here were defined by much more moderate and liberal courts. So this court will be fun to watch, interesting to watch, no question about it. But they're not afraid of overthrowing precedent, are they? And so we're going to see what happens with this case that I told you about out of Mississippi that you need to know the name of. But this is kind of an important case because a lot of the decisions I just heard could be changed. because so many of them were 5-4 decisions to begin with. And now you have a 6-3 court. By the way, a lot of people say, wait a minute, the court shouldn't be political. That's why we do lifetime appointments. You can't reduce their salary during the time they're, so you can't be influenced. Look, when you ask the #1 elected official in the country and give them sole power to pick judges and justices to the Supreme Court, is it political?
Yes.
Of course it is. And the former president, it was unprecedented. He got to choose 3 justices. On average, you get 1 per term if you're lucky. Obama got 1 and it got shut down on his second. Look, here's the thing. Trump will be remembered for one thing: completely reshaping the Supreme Court. Completely. No other president's been able to do that in modern times. So that's one of the things that Trump, it's probably what keeps him from being, further down below Buchanan and Johnson, is that he accomplished that goal, which was a stated goal of his campaign. All right, now here's the thing though. Imagine this, imagine very carefully. If Hillary Clinton had won a better campaign and her supporters had gotten behind her more, and she were president during the last 4 years, what would the court look like then? Key phrase here, ready? Elections have what? Consequences. And the next justice that looks like they may retire is a conservative justice. Will Biden get to pick that one? Or will the Senate get in control of the Republicans and they'll wait 5 years until there's a Republican president to fill the position? Elections have consequences, guys. Now, here's one. I love this case. Follow along. It's quite a story. So you guys know that they don't say the pledge in California, right? So 2005. Okay, here's the case. The case was brought by an atheist, right? Whose daughter was in 3rd grade, I think at the time, 3rd or 4th grade, somewhere along in there, elementary anyway. And basically he sued because the words "under God" make the pledge a prayer. How many of you agree that those words make it a prayer? How many don't? How many don't have an opinion? It's always a fun question to ask. Okay, so here's the thing. Does it suggest that everyone must believe in God? And this was the problem the parent had, because now their child's being, every time they say the pledge, there's a hint, that you should believe in God. And of course, he didn't believe that. But also, too, this was an argument used. Does it make us a totalitarian state? Look, I grew up with the images coming out of the Soviet Union and communist China and Cuba, where all the young kids, Hitler Youth, we saw those footage, from my parents' youth, where all of a sudden all the Nazi kids and the Hitler Youth are saying, Heil Hitler. Every morning, starting their school day with this pledge to say Stalin or Mao or their country or whatever. And when we say the pledge, does it make us look totalitarian, autocratic? Is the pledge incompatible with democracy and the First Amendment? Is it anti-freedom to, by law, pressure someone to say the pledge? How many of you, when you were little, 3rd, 4th grade, you just pop up and say the pledge and just sit down? And is that a form of propaganda? Let's get to some more other weighty issues. These are fun questions to ask, right? To think about. But this is the kind of cases the court has to hear. Can someone burn the flag in protest? And what about those groups whose religious beliefs, deeply held religious beliefs, preclude swearing loyalty to any power lesser than God? And there's quite a few of them, by the way. And then again, back to this one parent who was suing on the atheist line. So is it a prayer? California pledge law? Well, the guy won the case in district court. So here, this is important too for your learning. You guys now know 94 district courts within that district, they had to quit saying the pledge. So it's a certain section of Southern California. Then it goes up to the 9th Circuit. And the 9th Circuit Court of Appeals, which covers, of course, Washington, Oregon, California, Arizona, I think, also Hawaii and Alaska. It's a big one. They agreed. And you guys, here was part of the case. Do you know the words were added? The original pledge didn't have it in it. It went like 50, 60 years with no under God in it. It was only in the 1950s when we were in the Cold War and we wanted to differentiate ourselves from the godless communists that we added the words as part of our Cold War efforts. And oh, by the way, it's not in the Constitution. There's no pledge in the Constitution. There's an oath for those who were elected, but no pledge for the people. It started out simply enough. Some guy wrote it, Baptist preacher wrote it. People thought, that's cool. So a few schools started to pick it up. And when they did the pledge in those original, you could see the pictures, if you look them up, they said the pledge like this.
There's the Bellamy School.
Yeah.
1920s.
And as soon as Hitler came along and the Hitler Youth were going like this, we're going, oh, crap. Seriously, that happened.
Hitler used it for 8 years, and now the Bellamy salute is now racist.
Interesting comment there. Okay, now here's the thing though. So this is why if you're from California, Hawaii, Alaska, Washington, Oregon, you don't say the pledge at all. But what about the other districts? That's just the Ninth Circuit. Our circuit never decided the case, so we still say the pledge. Your comment?
I'm from California.
Oh, keep coming.
We used to say the pledge in the morning.
Okay, so let's go ahead and see what happened. The circuit ruling in the Ninth Circuit, which covered California in the district case, was overturned by the Supreme Court. It was reversed, but not for the reason you think. The Supreme Court does not want to touch this issue. They found a technicality. There was a divorce situation. Mom had custody, and therefore she is the one that can sue on behalf of her child's education. He did not have custody, so he had, keyword here, you need to know it, standing. He had not been harmed by the law. Therefore, he had no standing in the case. And they threw it out because, hey, Dad, you don't have a right to bring this case because you're not responsible for her education. Mom is. Mom could have brought the case, but you can't. They dodged it. They just simply sidestepped the issue completely. And they've never decided it. Now, in past, I would have said, nor will they ever take this on to tell people, oh, yeah, you don't have to say the pledge, or yes, you do. Because either way they decide, what's going to happen? You got Roe v. Wade all over again. But this court could. This court could. So we'll see what this court does. You got 20 years, by the way, to live with this particular court, because elections have what? And the consequence of Trump's big win is that he got to magically, all the stars aligned, change the nature of the court. First president to do it since the 1940s. And that would have been, by the way, Franklin Roosevelt. So look, they serve for life. So this court's going to have, and so a lot of these rulings that we're talking to you could change. As it stands now, though, here's how it works. If you're in a blue state, there is a state law, so it defaulted to federalism, right? Which may be what happens with the case out of Mississippi. I don't know. But in this particular case, yeah, all the blue states have some requirement. Now, you said in California, it was what, once a week?
No, I did it every day in the morning.
Every day in the morning in
Every day in the
California.
morning we did it.
Really?
Yeah.
Oh, wow. Okay. Well, I want to address that just a little bit. Look at the states in yellow, and there's no law at all. So it's just up to the school. And then in the red states, the schools have the option to do it or not do it on a regular basis. So look, face, if you have an assembly or something, you might want to not have it that day, that kind of thing. So it's different. It's a patchwork, again, like so many things are when you go to federalism. Can someone be forced to say the pledge? However, that has been decided. The law, again, was challenged by Jehovah's Witness again. This is just one example of many where they challenged it. The case was 1943. So we're in the middle of World War II here, one of the most patriotic eras of our country's history. And in West Virginia School of Education versus Barnett, they said school children could not be forced to say the pledge or to salute the US flag. Jehovah's Witness, Seventh-day Adventists, there's quite a list of Quakers. You go on down the list, right, of churches that literally say that's, well, I don't know, the equivalent of worshiping something other than God, right? And they're pretty serious about it. So I've heard stories, one in Colorado recently, where a teacher, 8th grade, forced that student to stand up in violation of their religious beliefs. That teacher was fired the next day. So in Utah, you must say the pledge, except you mustn't worry about that because of this amendment. In order to line up with the case we just talked about, the Jehovah's Witness case, know the name of it, right? This is how our law was amended. Now, the original law said once a week, okay? Now, they took that law and changed it with a new bill, and basically once a week at the beginning of school day. This was 40 of the 42 years I've been teaching. I mean, it's just like, that was what we did. Anyway, but here's the thing. When they said this, they moved it to each day. So here's how, notice how the law was, they got rid of the old law and they put the new one in at the end of each day. And it used to be just elementary schools. Now it's junior high and high school. Okay, so junior highs and high schools had the option back in the day, but that's changed. The Pledge of Allegiance to the flag shall be recited once at the beginning of each day in each public school, not just elementary. Each public school classroom in the state led by a student in the classroom as assigned by the teacher on a rotating basis. Okay. So how many of you do this in your first period? You just go down the row and everybody takes a turn, right? Okay, but let's go through a little bit more. What if I did that? So let's say the pledge. Okay, you start it. You're next. You're next. You're next. What would happen?
What if someone doesn't want to say it?
I got half the students in my first period that do not stand for the pledge at all. And I asked them the same question. You know what they said? I said, I'm not doing it. It's called civil what? Civil disobedience. You're breaking a law that you think is unjust, but you're not really breaking the law. Let's go in and read how this comported then with the West Virginia case. Each student shall be informed by posting a notice, conspicuous place, that the student has the right not to participate in reciting the pledge. Have you ever gone to a school classroom where it's sitting there on the wall? No, I don't bet any of you. Have you ever seen a notice that said, hey, you don't have to say the pledge if you don't want to? You seen it? Where? Oh, so she's done it. Oh, yeah, she's awesome. Okay, so she's read the law, obviously, right? Okay, you've seen it there too. Trust me. How many saw it in your elementary school? Nobody? Crickets?
I didn't even know it existed.
I know. Until you get to here, you don't even know, right? Okay, so students shall be excused from reciting the pledge with written request from the student's parents. Wait a minute, time out. So now we have to collect written requests, or you have to stand? How many of your parents would give you a written request? So why don't we just get busy filing those, and then we'll go down the roll and see who has their note, and the rest have to stand. What would happen in my first period? Wow, it's been a tricky one. It started like 3 years ago when a group of students really worried about the Black Lives Matter issues and also the school shootings, like the one we just had. They would refuse to say, it was this black students right here, about 8 of them refused to stand for the whole year. And the other side of the room were students yelling the pledge to try to shame them, and vice versa. It was like loathing. So I kind of quit doing it because I thought, this is hostile. It's been tricky. This first period has really been good because here's the rest of the law. Here we go. Students shall be excused, but okay. At least once a year, students shall be instructed that participation in the Pledge of Allegiance is voluntary and not compulsory. And so then do you need a parent note? The law is what? A little confusing. And not only is it acceptable for someone to choose not to participate in the Pledge of Allegiance for religious or other reasons, but students should show respect to any student who chooses not to participate. So this law, I think, needs revision because it's a bit confusing and people are just ignoring parts of it.